Hey there, friends, and welcome to this episode of SelfKind with me, Erica Webb. I wonder if you've ever ridden a mountain bike, one that has really awesome suspension, so that when you are going over bumps and rocks and all of those sorts of things, you kind of do that like bouncy, squishy thing. And I wonder if you've also ridden a bike that didn't have that kind of suspension, and every time you went over so much as a crack, it would be like thunk and really tricky. So we're going to use this idea of bikes and suspension to talk a little bit about self-care and the inevitable bumps in the road. So I really like this analogy. I'm finding it really helpful for myself, and I am trusting that it will be helpful for many of you as well. I was thinking about this because it's not uncommon for clients in a counseling setting or in a mindful movement setting to kind of feel like they've gotten to a point where they've got it. They have got their anxiety a lot more under control. They are feeling like they've got their self-care practices kind of on lock. They have done enough of the, quote unquote work that they feel like they've arrived somewhere that is better than it was before. And then what can happen is that something happens, something that is very much usually outside of their control, some sort of life event. Somebody gets sick, there's an accident, something happens with work, and suddenly they're like, maybe I wasn't as healed or good or done as I thought. And it's kind of unfortunate when we think like that, because it makes it seem like we're the problem. And most of the time that just isn't true. So this analogy around the bike and suspension, I think is really helpful to think about why are we going through the effort of healing and self-care and self-compassion and self-kindness and fostering self-love. Because the truth is, it's not so that the bumps in the road disappear, because you can't control that. What we're doing when we say, I'm going to show up for my practices, I'm going to show up for self-compassion, I'm going to practice these things that feel resourcing and nurturing and kind to myself and my body, is we're fitting our bike with the top-notch suspension. We're saying, I don't want to ride over these bumps and cracks and rocks and feel every single thud the whole thing's going to shake loose and I'm going to lose parts along the road. I want to be able to sort of see that there's some bumps coming, or perhaps I'm on that bump and the bump doesn't disappear, but my ability to get over it, get through it, move with it is very much enhanced. That is a much more helpful way to think about sort of life's inevitable twists and turns than to think, well, the goal is to make sure that there's no bumps. Because the thing is that, find me a life where that is true. Find me a life where there aren't unexpected twists and turns, where there aren't unexpected bumps, where there aren't things that happen to people that there was nothing that they could do to control. And so when we are prioritizing and committed to doing the things that help us fit that suspension and keep it tuned. I don't know, is that something you do with suspension? Maybe. That is the bit that we can control. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the sort of pathway or the journey over life's bumps won't still be difficult, right? Maybe life throws you one of those boulders that just is damn hard to get over and navigate, no matter how good your suspension. But it still makes that process different than it would be without it. And so we have to stop letting the goalposts be some sort of version of perfection that isn't fair to expect from ourselves or from life, because it's just not that simple. And we have to start asking, how can I engage in the things that allow me to navigate life with a little bit more ease, even if it doesn't make it easy? And depending on the stage that we're at, depending on what's happening, there may well be periods where it does feel kind of easier, right? Maybe there's a period of life where it feels like you're just cruising down that road and you know, as we did when we were little, legs out to the side and just flying. And then there'll be other periods of life where you're like, how did I find myself in the most rocky terrain that is known to humankind? Either way, suspension's going to help. So I hope that's a really helpful analogy. I know I am finding that really helpful for myself at the moment, because motivation's a problem too sometimes, you know, like showing up for the things that nurture us and that feel like they resource us and that feel like they help us to maintain our capacity to keep going. Like they take time, they take effort, they take energy, and there are so many other things that we sometimes need to do. And if we are in that rocky terrain, it can feel like just surviving takes everything we've got. And so I think sometimes if we can think about this from the perspective of, okay, but remember, if I do these things, I'm helping to fit and tune my suspension to get through this, to navigate this, to be with this, then it kind of helps with that motivation piece. We're not relying on motivation falling from the sky. We're saying, no, I have some agency here. This is something that I can do to support myself, even in this tricky terrain. So I hope that's helpful. I would love to hear if it lands and what it makes you think of as well. I'm going to leave it there. Short, sweet, to the point, and I will be back again next week.